Double Shot with your favourite bogans, Alex Fitzgerald and Mitchell Scale. Mitch, welcome back. But, I mean, welcome back. You never really left. You basically just sit in the wing, ready, prepared.
You will find me sitting at my desk with a run sheet, ready to run into the studio whenever demanded, and today is that day, and I'm happy to be back, Alex.
What a legend. James, over in Europe, only posting us photos of him basically in various places, but always with the beer in his hand.
Beer or food, and generally sweet food at that. But, yeah, he's doing a bit of a culinary – oh, no, I shouldn't have gone with that word. He's doing a bit of a tour
so
of.
Glad you're here.
Yeah. Oh no, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. I'm not even going to have a second attempt. But no, there's a bad day to be a donut or a beer in the northern hemisphere, I reckon.
Hard place for a beer's existence up there, isn't that true? Now you're on the opposite spectrum, training for a triathlon. You were complaining about your hammies before. You got to meet an osteo. What's going on?
Yeah, no, the training's in full force, and James is actually doing the same triathlon. And must I say, he, according to his Strava activity, he has maintained that training over in Europe. So hats off to the great man. He's been running around Kensington in London and swimming around the bays of Majorca in Spain. So, geez, pretty good place to do it.
Far out. I have a theory that Han won't actually let him have said sweets without seeing the Strava, like the evidence.
He's
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, pay his calories up front is, I reckon, her deal.
So good. Now, I actually read a stat fact this week, and it made me think of you, and I thought, what a timely stat fact. It's actually not a stat, it's just a fact. It's more of a fun fact.
Okay.
More of a fun fact.
I'm a little bit nervous.
This is quintessential, Mitch. Fun fact, I'll just let it play. Stat fact.
The stat man.
Stat fact. God, I love it. I love that track. A person with damage to the right brain hemisphere can develop a joke addiction. I reckon. Compulsive need to constantly tell jokes. I think you've got a bit of damage to the right side there.
Look, I was thinking maybe both sides have got a bit of damage, but I'll take the right side, and jokes are fine. I'm a bit of a jokester. Speaking of which, NRL Grand Final on the weekend, a little bit of a joke as well.
Barry. What a Barry.
Much the same as the AFL, mind you. I'm not biased in that regard.
Yeah.
But Panthers, they took home the Chockies in what was anything but thrilling victory against the Parramatta Eels at 28-12. So unfortunately, a few fizzes in the sporting world of late when it comes to grand finals, which is no good.
They took home more than the Chockies.
Yeah, correct.
Way more than took home the Chockies and the Eels' dignity.
100%.
They would have had to get. Listen to this segue.
Here we go.
They would have had listeners. They would have had to get extra luggage to take home the dignity of the Eels players, and hopefully, they flew Rex.
Oh well, they live in Sydney where it was played, so I don't think they flew anywhere.
The Eels might have just wanted to get out of the vicinity, well out of the vicinity, but they'd be flying into a...
Look, they might be straight onto the footy trip, Mad Monday in the Northern Hemisphere with our man eating donuts. But you did mention Rex, and I every time I see Rex in the news, I do think of you because it was some months ago you told us Rex, hidden gem as far as airlines go. And the Department of Transport have recently come out, and yet again, Rex at the top of the Australian Airlines in terms of performance, in departures on time as well as cancellations. Departures, they're 82% leaving within 15 minutes of their departure time.
Yeah,
and cancellations as low as 0.8%. So
less than 1% cancellations.
Yeah, absolutely. And to put that into context, the next best was Virgin at 2.2%. So Rex is first, Daylight, then the others. So anyway, I always think of you when I see that.
Thank you. I mean, I saw that you and James went as far as to book a work flight with Rex, which was
Rex.
Honourable. So thank you. Thank you. And it was on time and it was sensational.
It was great.
You had Wi-Fi. And how good is that?
Yeah, it was Melbourne to Sydney, so, only the hour, but it was...
You get a lot done in an hour.
Can't complain. And in other news, Alex, I see here...
more than news, Schmitz.
This is a great... Well, it's great news for anyone who's a property investor in Australia, but particularly to those who own property in Queensland, the land tax.
Huge.
Gonskis.
Huge. you know, like politics always, there's a bit of shafting, but there's nothing like getting shafted by your own treasurer, your own party. And that's what Anastasia Palaszczuk has dealt with there. The Queensland Premier, who we know all the premiers thanks to COVID, she's been forced to dump before she got dumped, you know, that old trick. You've probably done a bit of those, a bit of a preemptive dump. You know, you've probably thought, this girl, I'm still in love with her. She's going to break up with me, but to save face, I'm going to try to break up with her first. Have you done a bit of that?
No, not at all.
You've done a bit of that? Yes,
not
you have.
At all.
Absolutely, you have. Anyway, she's come out, she's dumped the very controversial Queensland land tax that was sending our questions into an absolute another gravitational orbit.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Mitch, but at your barbecues and the various weddings and bucks you've been to, but I don't think I've ever been asked by so many diverse people what this Queensland land tax means.
Yeah, 100%. Not so much at the Bucks parties. It didn't come up that often. But, yeah, barbecues and other places it tends to come up. But I think, just to put it into perspective, I think what the Queensland government was proposing prior to scrapping it was that they would allow for an investor's national holdings in land value to go towards their assessment to pay land tax in Queensland. So, in other words, the threshold in Queensland is $600,000. So if you own land, not including your own home, and that land value exceeds $600,000, you would be required to pay land tax to the state government. Now, previously that was just your Queensland land holdings, but this proposed change that they implemented briefly was then going to account for all of your land in other states and territories of Australia. So that would go towards the $600,000 threshold, and you would then pay tax on the land that you own in Queensland, even if it was under $600,000.
And I felt like a bit of a duffer, Mitch, because we had a few people write in, I don't know, maybe April, May-ish, and they said, what's going on? Is this going to happen? And I had to eat my words a little bit because I said, look, this is just never going to happen. How can a state generate revenue off holdings in other states?
Yeah.
Lo and behold, it was passed in June and then doubled down, lo and behold. A preemptive dump has happened end of September. I think, what was it, the 29th or 30th of September, so late last week, a preemptive dump. And, producer Nick and I were talking about this yesterday. We were talking about, they've said they've shelved it, or, they've put it to the side for the moment. What does that mean exactly? Well, we don't know. It's been very ambiguous, but I think it's a bit of a face saver where they've said, basically, we've scrapped it because we can't make it work without the compliance of the other states, i.e. New South Wales. Dominic Perrottet, the Premier there, said, no, we won't comply. We're not going to give you our papers. We're not going to give you the land holdings of our people here. We're not going to play ball.
That's a good point you raised too, because I thought about that exact thing. I said, right, if I'm Palaszczuk, I'm running out this what's likely going to be a contentious change to the way in which we assess land tax. Surely you're making a quick phone call before going with it to your counterparts in the other states going, hey, you guys backing us on this or not? And as it turns out, New South Wales were very strong in their view that they weren't going to share any information, as was Tasmania and the Northern Territory.
That's right.
And then I think the balance of the states, including balance of the states and territories, stayed silent on the matter. So not one state or territory came out in support of it. So good riddance, scrapped, and bring on the investment properties.
Love a preemptive dump. That sounds weird. That sounded really weird.
Oh, no.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Okay, so I would say second headline of this week, far past the Queensland land tax being dumped, was pretty predictable. They've bumped up the interest rates again. The Reserve Bank of Australia met on Tuesday this week, and they've gone up by 25 basis points, otherwise 0.25%. Okay, now a lot of discussion was about this happening. It was kind of obvious that we had to do it. Inflation's still been going up. There's a lot of other things going on. So it was inevitable, right? But a lot of chatter was about it being bumped up 50 basis points or 0.5%. So it seems like somewhat of a conservative decision. As at now, we sit at a cash rate, interest rate with the RBA of 2.6%.
2.6%, yeah. So 2.5% increase since the 0.1 cash rate pre-COVID.
Far out. How crazy that we had a 0.1 cash rate.
Crazy, hey, when you think about it.
Like, it wasn't that long ago, but 0.1. Like, what? 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 We're a part of history for like a hot second.
Yeah, correct. And now we're sort of getting back to normal, I guess. And Lowy, as I like to call him, Dr. Lowe, the governor of the RBA, Philip.
Did you say low ears?
Lowy.
Oh, I thought you said
just
low
coining
ears.
him a nickname, as we do.
And I was like, I've never observed that his ears are a bit lower than the average man.
Great ears. Like great ears. Not a problem with his ears.
Fantastic listeners.
But he sort of addressed, the key points that you would expect in the RBA announcement today. Inflation being at the forefront of that. They reiterated they're committed to a 2 to 3% inflation rate. They're forecasting that will occur by 2024. Now, I say that with a grain of salt, right? Because last time they forecast something would happen until 2024, it was that we'd have interest rates, under 1%. So take it with a grain of salt. But they have, they reckon that by next year, so the CPI for the calendar year of 2022 will be 7.8%. Then we'll ease to 4% in 2023. And then 2 to 3% in 2024. So that's how they're seeing it. Employment was another thing they spoke about. Obviously, we're at 3.5% unemployment rate, lowest in 50 years. So noting that, the job market's tight, vacancies are up, job ads are up, and wages are growing. And household spending was obviously another thing that they touched on. But look, all in all, what does it mean? From a borrowing and household income point of view, I think that I touched that it was 2.5% up from, the 0.1% rate that we had, which is the totality of the mandated buffer that, you would have been serviced against if you borrowed money in 2020, right?
This is true.
So I think you're probably seeing a lot of first home buyers, get to the point where they've exercised that buffer. But to put it into context, if you owe 500 grand, the recent increase is about $74 per month, or it equates to $74 per month, and in total about $687 since the 0.1 cash rate. If you owe $750,000, it equates to about $110 a month, and if you owe $1 million, it's about $147 a month. So look, all in all, you would expect or hope that wages are growing. So I don't think any reason to be, going crazy.
No, and as James would love to add on to that, those differences at max case, if you got $1 million borrowings, you're paying $1,300 more per year. If you are feeling worried, feeling a bit conservative, maybe jump on Airtasker, jump on High Pages, and go and maybe top up your income a little bit there. And just a note, I just can't let this slide. The RBA did forecast, rates not going up till 2024, and they did actually pull that forward. Now, you had actually forecasted not getting married until about 2024, and that forecast has also significantly been brought forward.
Except that
a sniper was in the house. A sniper was in the house a couple of weeks ago. You dropped a knee.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, that was a welcomed change in forecast to our household, unlike the interest rates one. But I am engaged.
No doubt, mostly for Katie.
Yeah, I am engaged. Well, no, me too. We're very happy. We're over the moon, and marriage is on the horizon. Unless interest rates keep going up, then we'll just elope.
And Mum and Bub are doing great.
Very good.
It is October already. We just had a bit of a super Saturday here in Melbourne, so huge auction weekend. I think the end results were just over 60% there for Melbourne. But what you will find, Mitch, which is quite interesting, is that about 800 homes went to auction, but 1,300 was sold privately. This isn't on the run sheet. Sorry, bud. I've gone totally left.
She's gone rogue.
I've gone totally left and rogue. But the point here is that there are still some epic deals being done right now that are off the auction market. And what we're seeing with September house prices now being released is that, and it seems to be the general feel, even by CoreLogic, is that the house prices, if you will, nationally are somewhat stabilising. So Sydney particularly has sort of cooled off a little bit from its really high peak of about 1.4 and sort of come back a little bit. But from July till about where we are now, very, very, very early October, we haven't really seen a significant or worrisome decline. Similar for Melbourne, but, we're sort of sitting just above that $800,000 mark for the median house price. It's only coming down a little bit. And the combined capital's not too far from there. So, you've got the numbers in more detail, but even Tim Lawless, who's the head of research at CoreLogic, probably the most respected real estate data conglomerate in Australia or researchers, he's even said, look, this correction, which I don't love using that word, it should be over pretty early 2023. So, we might see the super duper peak coming off a little bit. But remember, that's all properties everywhere. I think James and I talked last week about, the upper quartile cooling right off. But, they're up as high as 40 mil, coming down a bit. So
yeah, you're dead right.
I waffled there, sorry.
The easing in house prices is definitely being driven by the top 25% of the market. I think if you actually segment the market, you'll see the lower end's actually growing. So there are suburbs that are still increasing in value, albeit they're those that sit in the lower quartile of the market, which is, naturally the markets that we're operating in as investors, certainly at our end. House prices driven by the upper quartile. But even saying that, like if you look at the numbers, Sydney and Melbourne are down year to date. That's no secret. But Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, Darwin, all still up year to date. Brisbane's up 3.7%. Adelaide's up 11%. So if you bought a $500,000 house in Adelaide in January, today it's still worth $550 plus.
Yeah.
So look, those types of markets that are affordable, that do have population growth infrastructure, they're starting, they're seeing the easing and certainly seeing segments of their market still performing. And you're dead right. Tim Lawless actually said in his release.
What did he say?
He said it is possible we have seen the initial shock of a rapid rise in interest rates pass through the market, and most borrowers and prospective home buyers have now priced in further rate hikes. He did go on to say that it was largely dependent on the interest rate environment moving forward.
Yes.
But he also went on to say that there's no evidence of distressed sales in the market. In fact, the opposite's occurred, where new listings are down.
Now, can I give one of the greatest examples of all time just off the back of that? And, you might call it a little bit of an anomaly, but it was in the Financial Review weekend just gone. They often do like a bit of a real estate one-on-one Q&A of a noteworthy property that was sold the weekend just gone. And the headline for this one was untouched 35-year-old house with $1.9 million price tag sells for $3 million.
Untouched?
Now, this is... Yeah, untouched, but I think it was kept in a fairly good condition. So, you call it a bit of a misleading headline. Regardless, get this, Schnitz. A 3-bedroom house on a 427 square metre block. Now, it was in Malvern East. Yep. That is inner city, pretty schmicko, like very sort of sexy area, I would say.
Bit bougie.
Bit bougie. Now, it was meant to go to auction. Meant to go to auction. So this is where auction clearance rates aren't the be-all and end-all. They give us a good indication, but not the be-all, end-all. It was meant to go to auction. Now, it was on the market for 16 days. 16 days. Mate, I can't achieve anything in 16 days. Now, I'm a highly disorganised human being, so that's not saying a lot. But it was on the market for 16 days.
Mate,
meant
16
to go to
days
auction.
wouldn't have even been the amount of days you worked in August.
That should have been our fun fact. Should have been our fun fact. Actually, can't wait to get the phone bill for September to compare how many calls, anyway. So it was meant to go to auction, but they started getting offers pre-auction, right?
Yep.
They got a $1.9 million offer, and the agents started to engage in these sort of prospective bidders at 1.9, and they're like, let's give this a crack. The agent admits in this article, he goes to, whoever was writing, look, just quietly in the Fin Review, I thought we were going to get 1.6. The house behind us sold for 1.55 18 months ago. Long story short, and probably not that long of a story because there's 16 days on the market, they had a shootout, bit of a Mexican standoff between two downsizers. It got to 2.8 mil, And then one of the downsides just said, I'll pay $3 million for the thing. Just I can't stand another day. Don't let me see 17 days.
What?
And it was sold for $3 million. So $1 million over what you might say was the reserve.
Geez, I hope the vendors gave the auctioneer a bonus, because that's some good work.
Well, the bonus is in their percentage of their commission. So, come on.
Ah, well. In any event, I hope he was paid well, because that's a great result. You're
just thinking like a bloke with commission breath, Schnitzel.
Hey, before we move on from house prices. This sort of a stat fact, not really, but I found it interesting that the combined capital cities would have to decline by a further 13.5% to wipe out the buffer or the gains on the recent cycle since COVID. So I thought that was quite interesting as well. Anyway, take it how you will.
And, it's hard to see that happening, don't you think? Because, unless it is all in that upper quartile. Because, like, our rental vacancy rates are so painstakingly low. They're less than 1% nationally. They're 0.9%. And we're only sort of getting more migration from here. So
100%.
It's just hard to see all of it come undone.
Yep, agree. And also to segue, you raise a good point, because migration's being switched back on and we're not building enough homes to keep up with population forecasts. So the Master Builders Association recently came out and they've put it down to a few things, labour shortages, lack of land, registration delays, all of the types of things that make it harder to build a home. But they've effectively coming out to say we're not going to build the target of 200,000 homes per year until 2026. So the new data released from the Masters Builders Australia suggests that we won't hit the 200,000 required to keep up with population growth until beyond 2026, which presents a significant problem, particularly in those developing areas and areas that are, getting hit with supply challenges. Sort of makes it very hard to solve a rental crisis when we're unable to build enough homes to keep up with population growth. So, I think the rental market sits in a pretty vulnerable position for tenants and a very strong position for landlords moving forward.
It does. And one of the numbers we talked about last week, which I guess I'm just the kind of person who I get things when I get to sort of mull on them a bit over time, But we looked at this epic graph last week where 25% of investors have been selling their property and not to other investors, to owner-occupiers. So 25% have been selling and only 7% have been actually buying new investment properties. So, you think about what you just said with the compounding of an undersupply of homes with migration coming in and maybe we just repeat ourselves too much, but then you've also got interest rates rising up. It will be really interesting to see what the banks actually do pass on. We've got a 25 basis point increase this week, but, the banks might not necessarily pass exactly that on, but it will wipe out some borrowing capacities. There'll be people that they just can't borrow anymore. So, we've got to deliver these homes, but now more people can't borrow. It looks like rents are going to increase considerably more in the next 6 to 12 months if you just sort of take all of those things on face value.
Yeah. Well, rents are up, say, for example, Sydney over the last 12 months, up 12%, Melbourne up 13%, Brisbane up 11%, Adelaide 11%, and so on and so forth. And they're not showing any signs of slowing on the back of, less than 1% vacancy rates across the country, and even more so in those tight markets like Adelaide, like Southeast Queensland. And those are the areas that we're going to struggle when it comes to supply.
Here's a crazy story for you. So we had a client event Wednesday night in Adelaide. I wasn't fortunate enough to go along. I was in a course all last week. And at the event, we had our the property manager that we recommend our clients to. Her name's Gwen. She's awesome. Yeah. She came along. And John, who was speaking at the event and sort of who our clients go to listen to, was giving a bit of a market update. And he goes, Gwen, come over here. Gwen, how did you have open homes on the weekend? What transpired? She said, yeah, we had 2 open homes for 2 properties out in the Northern Growth Corridor. She said, that's all we've got at the moment. We don't have enough. As soon as something comes on, it goes off. We had 2. Each one had 85 groups go through on a Saturday.
Crazy.
85. Have you heard that story yet?
Yeah, I was there.
Oh.
I heard it live from Gwen, actually.
Did I stuff up the? I'm hearsay. Did I?
No, that's bang on. John asked her live, how many did you have? 80 in each home. So that is no word of a lie. There's no Alex Fitzgerald mayonnaise on that. That is a vegan story if I've heard it.
Mitch, I feel like a damn fool. You need to come to the podcast with these stories. I'm regurgitating what my dad's told me. By the way, if you think there's a bit of Alex Fitzgerald mayo, it might actually just be the mayo my dad's put on the story, and I'm just trying to tell you what I've heard from him.
Talk about compound growth in mayo on stories when it passes through the Fitzgeralds.
That's right, compound growth in the 3 days. Oh, well, it's gone up. Well, they probably have had more applications from there now, but 85, that's like nothing I've ever heard before. What else you got for us? Anything else?
Look, I think we've rambled on for long enough, to be honest. Great to be here. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. I hope James is enjoying Europe. Thank you for having me, Alex, and I think I'm back again next week, so looking forward to that.
I think we've got you here in the in-house.
Yep.
Very lucky for at least 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. Yep.
At least 3 or 4 weeks, and by that time, I will have carried so much of the team. I'll need to go back on holidays, so you'll have to come back with James. I wasn't going to say anything, but I logged on about 10 a.m. to review the rundown, and in the last couple of times, I think I've filled in for you, and lo and behold, there's a bunch of stuff in there for me to prepare and to review today. Buckley's. Nothing. But Buckley's?
You had one or 2 things in there, and I've gone, geez. So I strapped up the shoulders. I got the Elastoplast out of the first aid cabinet, strapped the shoulders up, and said, let's go, and completed the rundown.
Yeah, I can see that you and James have conspired here, because even when I do the whole entire run sheet, it's just James's running joke. So hopefully by 2023, he's got some new material, because 3 years of recycled material, I tell you what.
Whip.
All
right, thank you very much.
We got you for quick shots, and I'll see you for the next 3 weeks, bud.
Awesome. See you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Double Shot with your favourite cousins, Alex and James Fitzgerald. If you've got a burning question or something we absolutely need to talk about on the pod, please write to us. Both of our emails are in the show notes. For little real estate tidbits and a little bit of banter, a lot of banter, you can follow us on the gram. Our handle is thedoubleshot.podcast. That, my friends, is thedoubleshot.podcast. Until next time, think of us when you sit back and sip your next double shot.